All right, welcome to How to Read Water, Clues and Patterns from Puddles to the Sea. So this is the intro. I'm going over the introduction to this book by Tristan Gooley. So learn to gauge depth, navigate, forecast weather, and make other predictions with water. So just the back slit here. Tristan Gooley helps us reconnect with nature by finding direction from trees, stars, clouds, and more. Now he turns his attention to our most abundant yet perhaps least understood resource in how to read water. He is the only living person to sail solo across the Atlantic and have flown solo across the Atlantic. So in the introduction to Tristan Gooley's book, he discusses how this is a book about physical clues. So this is a practical book. We're not just, philosophizing about water necessarily, even though I guess he gets philosophical about it too. But this is a book about the physical clues, signs, and patterns to look for in water, whether you are standing by a puddle or gazing out across miles of ocean. So clues, signs, and patterns. So pattern recognition, which is so important in everything, right? So this can only help us get even more in depth with our own pattern recognition, our own ability to recognize patterns in nature. So Tristan Gooley likes to point out in the beginning that many books like to deceive by treating water as a container. Water is seen as a box that creatures live in, a window through which we can view things. So in this book, water will not be relegated in this way. It will be treated as the subject. So basically, you can see animals, you can see plants. A lot of times when people are talking about water or dealing with it, they're talking about the beings in that water, the flora, the plant life, the seaweed, the algae, all this other stuff, right? The fish. So basically, he's saying, listen, we're not going to look at water in this way because what's happening here is that we want to see and discuss just water as a whole. Animals and plants will earn their place if they help to explain the behavior of the water we see, not the other way around. We will be focusing on water in its liquid form, not ice, snow, or steam. So this is good to know as we get into the book, right? What are we going to be focused on? How are we going to be dealing with it? What are the different definitions that we might need to know? So he also discusses how he's not going to show any preference for organic or inorganic clues. So organic meaning natural to the environment, right? And inorganic meaning not natural to the environment, maybe man-made, like a buoy or, a boat or something else, right? A wharf, something else in the environment. So Gooley goes on and he discusses how the late Roger Deacon pointed out that giraffes are the only mammals that cannot swim and that we have webbing between our thumbs and forefingers, unlike other apes. In support of the popular theory that we are drawn to water biologically as well as philosophically, which makes sense, right? We do have webbed fingers and we are drawn to water. We tend to be coastal dwellers, right? At least I am. Not everybody is, but a lot of people live on the coast, fish the coast, have been doing it for millennia now. What fascinates me is our ability to find meaning by understanding the physical causes of the patterns we see in water. Both perspectives, philosophical and practical, depend on taking the time to look. This is much more likely if we have something to look for. Understanding the things we see and the reasons for them does not reduce the beauty of the whole. It's quite the opposite, he says. So, yeah, I agree, right? That's why I'm reading this book, because I want to know, I can look at an ocean, see the ocean, but what's actually going on? How can I tell what the ocean's going to do? How can I predict how it might behave? How do I read the different behavioral patterns or the different events and stuff that occur within the water? Once you learn that you can measure the size of raindrops by looking at the colors in a rainbow, the more red, the bigger the drops. Rainbows take on a new beauty and lose none. The same is true of all the signs we find in bodies of water. And when I was reading this, I'm thinking, there's so many people out there who get like pissed or upset because you try to tell them a fact like that. Like, look, did you know that raindrops, are, if there's a lot of red in the rainbow, then the drops in the rain are going to be bigger in size. I mean, I agree. That doesn't take away from the beauty, that just enhances it. You just see just how connected each thing is to the other thing. Imagine that's how connected everything is. The colors in a rainbow are able to tell us the size of a raindrop. And this is what Gooley's about. I mean, I've read his other book, The Lost Art of Reading Nature's Signs, and such a good book. And I'm probably going to read it and go over and break it down here eventually. But I wanted to start with a book I hadn't read. And this one is it. So these water signs, he just is so good at pointing out all the stuff. It's how I learned that, clover on the ground is a sign of foot traffic, or, maybe game traffic or something. And, he's how I learned that tree branches grow towards the south. So you can always usually tell where the sun is by the way the tree branches go. And then the northern side of a tree will be straight, vertical. And then you'll see all the branches going towards one side of the tree, which is the side of the sun to the south, right? Normally. Now, it depends. If it's on the edge of a clearing and it only gets sun in a certain direction, the branches are going to grow that way. But it's very cool to see, So he's just full of these awesome little tidbits and facts. But like, they're very practical facts. They're the kinds that give you the ability to make sense of your environment and to actually begin to enjoy it. Like, it makes going for a walk more enjoyable. He talks about turning walks into games, and that's what you do. A ball, a diamond, a ball. Sam, the Viking blonde Scandinavian skipper, called across the deck to me as I took my turn at the helm. So he says, and then Tristan Gooley says, vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver. So there's something cool. All right, so there's these things called day shapes in sailing, and that's what they're going over now. A ball, a diamond, a ball, right? That actually means something. So you put at the top of your mast, which is like the actual sail, right? As you can see, he's doing here, he's tying it to a rope, and he's putting up these different symbols. And the geometrical shapes are a ball, a cylinder, a cone, and a diamond. And they're out on this J-class sailboat in this book in the beginning, and it's a restricted ability to maneuver, one ball, one diamond, one ball. So all these day shapes actually make sense to other sailors. They can see this vessel's, not able to maneuver. This vessel is a fishing vessel. This vessel is being towed. So how cool that they use these shapes to communicate. I didn't really know that. I mean, I grew up around sailboats with my uncle, but I never really went out on his when he was sailing. I always went out on motorboats with my other uncle. And so I never really learned these things about sailing. So it was really cool to look them up in the beginning of this intro, even though he didn't explain and break these parts down. I found them just because of his story. He goes over about how he's with he got a once in a lifetime sort of opportunity to go on this awesome J-class sailboat. And a J-class yacht is a single masted racing yacht. So as you can see right here, and they have this universal rule that determines what class a boat is. And here's the universal rule formula. And as you can see, the universal rule is about, so as you can see, the sail area was to create narrow boats with long overhangs. And to do this, they created the universal formula, which is the Harashoff or the Siwanaka rule. And it's just a mathematical formula that gives you a rating based on how narrow and how much of an overhang you have, and you have to be within these specifications, within these foot ranges, in order to get a certain rating and be able to participate in sailing races, or at least professional sailing races. So just by looking up this stuff off of this guy's book, you can find out how all these little cool tidbits like day shapes and all these things just from a little story he's telling about him and his friends sailing. And he talks about how he's going for his yacht master class. And so he's going for his yacht master, class at the Maritime Academy. And he's like, if somebody gives you a degree, or if somebody gives you a certificate, it says, hey, you must know something. But he's like, as much as there's still a little bit of doubt. And so he starts talking about this guy, Captain Abharah, Abharah, Abharah. And this guy was like, I guess he was a shepherd in this Persian district. I'm not really sure. Obviously, seems like a more Middle Eastern name or something. But he hopped to plying the treacherous China sea lanes. So plying means sailing back and forth of the China sea lanes. At the time, it was felt that nobody ever made the journey to China and back without serious mishap. Abharah did it 7 times. So he displayed extraordinary knowledge. So Abharah is the real deal, it seems. He is doing some stuff that other people can't seem to do themselves. This China Sea is treacherous, and Abharah is able to make the journey. So here's Tristan Gooley talking about when he was first sailing and becoming yacht master. He was being haunted by this Captain Abharah, but the guy was dead. And the reason that he was being haunted by him was because of the knowledge that this guy has. So a sailor who also worked the field route to China, Captain Sharyari, was waiting out a worrying calm in the midst of the typhoon season. The respected Captain Abharah was sitting calmly in a canoe. So off in the distance, you got Captain Abharah. You got this Captain Sharyari, new names to me. He sends his men out to check out this boat, and they find it's Captain Abharah. He's out there just hanging out in a canoe, and they're waiting out this calm of the storm because they're like, we're going to get hit with this typhoon. And so Captain Abharah refused to swap his small canoe for their greatest vessel. He would only join them if he was paid 1,000 dinars, which is like an ancient gold coin used in Muslim countries, or a monetary unit in like Iraq and everywhere else. So he's like, I'll join you, because he knows he's got the wisdom, right? He knows that they want him to come aboard because he knows what he's doing, and they're worried about the typhoon. So he's going to take advantage of this. Smart man, right? So Captain Sharyari and his crew mulled over this proposal with their estimate of Abharah's wisdom. They agreed and lifted Abharah on board. Sorry about my crappy pronunciation of these names. So Abharah explained they were in great danger. They must throw their heavy cargo overboard, saw down their main mast, and throw that overboard too. Then they were to cut the cable for the main anchor and let the ship drift. So this guy's saying everything that's pretty counterintuitive, right? You don't want to get rid of your anchor. You don't want to get rid of your mast. You don't want to just let your ship drift, but here they are, they're going to do it. They did as they were told, and they waited. On the 3rd day, the typhoon hit them. The new lightness of the ship allowed it to bob over waves and reefs like a cork, and they were saved instead of swamped. On the way back from China, Abharah ordered the vessel to stop. The dinghy was lowered, and some sailors were sent to retrieve the great anchor. He explained that the knowledge of the moon, the tides, the winds, and the signs in the water made all of it perfectly straightforward. So Abharah is telling us right now that all you needed is basic knowledge of the moon, the tides, the winds, and you can figure this stuff out. You can figure, when's the typhoon going to hit? What's going to happen? And how should I survive this basic knowledge of the fact that like you need to bob up and down like a cork, I guess, right? It was that Captain Abharah's deep intuition and understanding haunted me. The wisdom was not to be found in any of the exams I'd passed. Knowledge that allows someone to read the physical signs in the water. So he's like, it was killing me. It was haunting me that this guy knew all this stuff. And it's not on any of my exams, all this moon, tides, wind stuff that he knew about. This sort of esoteric knowledge of the sea that I'm looking to obtain, because who wouldn't want that, right? What kind of real navigator and searcher like Gooley, adventurer like himself, is going to want to go without the more esoteric knowledge, right? And so he goes, I thought I could get it by spending all this time at sea. And by being at sea for so long, I thought I could crack the code, but that didn't work out. He's like, all I really learned was how to eat raw fish with lime juice and how to check, a synoptic weather report, which is basically like a large amount of data for a vast area like an ocean. I was wrong. Time at sea on modern yacht teaches you how to manage a boat and a crew, how to read between the lines of a synoptic weather forecast. So there you have that. I discovered the clues that unlock a deeper understanding about water are not found in greater proportion the further from land we are. The things we notice in puddles and streams can be just as profound and helpful to understanding what is happening as those that might be spotted from a vessel mid-Atlantic. So that's a pretty important thing to know in the introduction, right? That he's saying we can learn almost just as much from a puddle as we can from being out on a vessel in the middle of the sea. Secondly, it was actually easier to learn about water with your feet on firm ground than in a boat. In this book, I will illustrate how these things cannot just be learned on dry land, but witnessed and enjoyed from there too. So this is cool too, because we're learning about water and you're thinking, do I have to go out on a sailboat to enjoy this? But he's telling us, no, if you're on dry land, if you have access to a puddle, if you have access to probably a lake or something, you can learn just as much almost about the ocean. It is a tried and tested approach used by some of the greatest readers of water science humanity has ever produced. So basically, this approach of learning on dry land before you go out into sea is a tried and tested approach. Without the use of charts, compass, or sextant, the Pacific Islanders found their way over great stretches of ocean. The reason for introducing them here is to discuss their methods of passing on their unique level of skill to the next generation. Word for the body of knowledge, an expression in the Pacific, Kapasani Lamatu, the talk of the sea, the water lore. So, Kapasani Lamatu. Kind of like pronouncing it maybe a little French, Lamatu, Lamato. The talk of the sea, the water law. So basically, there is a word for it. Having this esoteric sort of knowledge of the water, this practical understanding of it, the ability to read its signs and sense what it's going to do and understand it inside and out. The finer parts of the art were actually passed on while still on land. Many lessons about stars, wind, and waves would be taught indoors. So indoors. So some of these greatest sea navigators were getting their lessons indoors. That's where they were learning all about this. Stars, wind, waves, moon, tides, right? The whole bit. Ian Proctor, sailing strategist, declared, many sailing races are won before anyone gets in the boat by reading the signs in the water. So this is bringing home the point from Gooley that it's really, really important that we read the signs in the water, because the person who knows the most can probably do the most damage. Even if you can sail a little bit faster than me, if I understand what's going to happen, if I understand how the water is going to behave, if I understand how the winds are going to behave, if I understand how the tides are going to behave, then I'll probably have an advantage on you and be able to make my journey that much more smooth, and slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? So having the knowledge allows you to speed up your journeys because you're not fighting against nature. For me to give you the best chance of enjoying this art, there are two obstacles we need to overcome. So Gooley's laying it out to us right now. There's a couple of obstacles in our way. And so they are: the first, historians have divided water up into its realms: ponds, rivers, lakes, and seas, which are deemed very different to each other. However, the water itself does not hold a great respect for these boundaries, and we can learn a lot about what is going on in the world's greatest ocean by looking at a village pond. So reinforces that point. We can learn a lot about the world's greatest ocean by looking at a village pond. I'm in. Secondly, the study of water signs does not lend itself perfectly to an impatient checkbox approach. If you find a sign, it may well find it on your first attempt, but more likely it will appear at a time of its choosing, provided you retain enough curiosity to keep looking for it. So he's like, don't get impatient with this, get the body of knowledge down and then take what you get. I mean, the winds, the tides, all this will serve these clues and patterns up as they serve them up. You're not going to go to the beach and just order up these signs and conditions. Best approach is to view this as a whole. This book is structured to allow you to embark on a quest to get to know all the signs while remaining aware that each one is a part of a bigger jigsaw. This will make you ready not only seek individual signs, but to meet water in all its moods in whatever guise it appears. There will be challenges, frustrations, a little confusion. When you meet some of the more complex patterns for the first time, think of the signs and clues we will meet as characters. Some are straightforward, but the more complex ones are often the most interesting ones over time. That's good. So, yeah, we'll get to meet some of the basic characters. Yes, that'll be easy to spot, but it'll be worth it when we pay attention for these more complex things, when we're putting together all of our knowledge into a giant body, fitting all the pieces into this jigsaw puzzle, he says. And he's going to give us the tools to do that. So we don't have to think it's just a one-off. Oh, we're going to notice one thing, and then we'll notice another thing. It's all going to connect. When Chad was asked whether there was any point in studying these methods in the modern world, he replied, "It really is a pretty unique set of skills that one would aspire to become proficient at. What it truly does is sharpen the human mind, intellect, and ability to decipher codes in the environment. For me, it's the most euphoric feeling that I have ever felt." So this is a master navigator now. And he's saying that this is the most euphoric feeling when you actually learn about these things, when you actually take the time and to understand these patterns. If you ever see water in exactly the same way after reading this book, I will have failed in my own task and there will be no coconut potions for me. I hope you enjoy the quest, Tristan Gooley. And that's the end of his introduction. So that's just a quick breakdown of the intro. I read quite a bit of the important information to you from it because you have to know what you're getting into, right? And we want to understand, what we need to do. So we need to keep an open mind. We shouldn't be impatient, shouldn't expect to see everything at once. And, we have to take water out of this box that people have already put it in and start to understand that we can learn about the ocean from local water sources, puddles, ponds, lakes, rivers, right? And so with this body of knowledge, we need to know that over time, we're going to put all these pieces together. So we're going to read 1 chapter, 2 chapters, 3 chapters, but in the end, it's all going to link together. We'll be able to look for all the different things we read about and spot them over time. And obviously, there's a deeper understanding that all these master navigators have, that this is the way to do it. You learn about these things on land, and then you try to spot them. It's better to have somebody point these things out to you before you get in the situation than you're just out there and you don't know what to look for. You're basically flying blind. But in this case, it's like we're going to have the information before we go out into the situation, which always helps. So tune back in for chapter 1 of How to Read Water, Clues and Patterns from Puddles to Sea by Tristan Gooley. And we'll get this book rolling. See you soon.